Rich woman humiliates black woman. At luxury store unaware, she is the owner. It was a bright and breezy morning when the luxurious boutique on the corner of the street opened its doors for the day. The glass windows reflected the warm sunlight, casting a soft glow over the carefully arranged displays inside. The store was known for its exclusive high-end collection, items crafted by the world's finest artisans, a place where the city's wealthiest came to indulge. The air was filled with a quiet hum of activity as the staff prepared for the day ahead. Inside, a well-dressed woman, Zara, stood behind the counter, her posture poised as she carefully reviewed some inventory reports. Zara had been the heart of the boutique since its opening, its owner, though few knew it. She had built this store from the ground up, and every piece of fabric, every display, every design was a reflection of her vision, her hard work, and her dream. Yet she always stayed behind the scenes, allowing her employees to take the spotlight while she made the decisions that kept the boutique running smoothly. On this particular morning, a woman entered the store who would soon change the course of Zara's day. Her name was Claire, an affluent woman with a sharp nose, a sharp gaze, and an even sharper sense of entitlement. She entered the boutique as though the world should part for her, her high heels clicking loudly against the polished floor. Claire's eyes skimmed the displays, admiring the expensive handbags, the delicate jewelry, and the fine clothing. Her gaze didn't waver from the merchandise, not even when she passed by Zara, who stood behind the counter, watching the woman's every step. Claire, however, was too consumed with her own world to notice the woman behind the counter. Zara, being accustomed to the unspoken rules of the elite, knew that the wealthy often didn't acknowledge those they deemed below them. But it wasn't just Claire's disregard that caused Zara to take notice. It was her air of superiority, the way she walked as if the world had been designed to cater to her every whim. As Claire continued to browse, Zara maintained her composure, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of the woman's dismissive attitude. She knew that the store catered to people like Claire, people who had money to spare but who sometimes failed to understand the hard work behind the scenes. Zara had faced her share of judgment, both inside and outside the boutique. But today something felt different. Today Claire was about to cross a line. It wasn't long before Claire approached Zara, her eyes scanning the woman with a coldness that left no room for warmth or connection. Zara greeted her politely, offering her assistance as she had done with countless other customers. But Claire barely looked up, instead glaring at Zara from behind her large sunglasses. "I need help," Claire said, her voice dripping with impatience. "I want the most expensive handbag in here." Zara, taken aback by the blunt demand, nodded and motioned toward the display case where some of the store's most exclusive bags were displayed. Claire followed her without a word, but there was something about the way she looked at Zara, like she was doing the woman a favor by acknowledging her presence. Zara opened the case, revealing a pristine leather bag with intricate gold detailing. It was one of the store's signature pieces, one that Zara herself had designed. Claire's eyes lit up, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "This one," she said dismissively. "I'll take it." Zara handed the bag to Claire, who immediately inspected it with the cold detachment of someone used to getting whatever they wanted. But as Claire examined the bag, she made a remark that would set the tone for everything to come. "How do you people even manage to work here?" Claire asked, not looking up from the bag. "It must be exhausting for someone like you to stand around all day, pretending to care about what's in these cases." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She had heard comments like that before, backhanded remarks meant to make someone feel small, invisible. But there was something about Claire's words that struck a nerve. Perhaps it was the way Claire assumed she had no value beyond the store's merchandise. Or maybe it was the condescending tone that was all too familiar to Zara, a tone that she had heard growing up in a world where people like Claire would never have believed someone like her could succeed. But Zara didn't let the insult show. She simply smiled, her calm demeanor betraying nothing of the anger rising inside her. "I assure you, ma'am," Zara said, her voice steady, "everyone here is passionate about what we do." Claire scoffed, clearly unimpressed. Sure," she said, turning away. "I'll take the bag, but honestly, I'm surprised you're even allowed to work here." She walked towards the counter to pay, the arrogance in her step obvious to everyone in the store. Zara's eyes narrowed as she watched Claire approach the register. The insult stung, but she knew she had to remain composed. The last thing she wanted was to cause a scene. She was the owner of this store, a place she had worked tirelessly to build, but she had learned long ago that some people would always look down on her, simply because of who she was and where she came from. As Claire handed over her credit card, Zara took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain polite. The exchange was quick, almost dismissive, but before Claire left, she turned back to Zara and, without so much as a glance at the woman who had just sold her an item worth thousands of dollars, she said, "I'll be sure to tell your boss about this, assuming he knows how badly his staff is treating customers." Zara kept her face neutral, even as her heart sank. She knew the truth. She was the boss. But Claire would never know that. Not yet, at least. Zara stood behind the counter, silently staring at Claire as she made her way out of the boutique. Clutching the expensive handbag in her hands like it was some sort of trophy, the arrogant woman's words still echoed in Zara's ears, and it took all of her strength to hold her emotions in check. It wasn't just the insult that hurt. It was the fact that it wasn't new. It wasn't the first time someone had looked at her like that, as if she didn't belong in this world, as if she had somehow snuck her way into this space that was never meant for someone like her. Zara had worked hard for everything she had. She had built this boutique with her bare hands, designing every collection, hand-picking every piece that adorned the walls, and making sure each customer felt valued. Yet, to Claire and people like her, she was just another employee with no face, no story, no worth beyond the role they assumed she was playing. It was a feeling Zara knew all too well. It had followed her for years, even before she had opened this store, before the designer labels, the high-end products, the reputation. Her journey hadn't been easy. Zara hadn't been born with the privilege of wealth or status. Growing up in a small apartment with her mother, she had learned early on that the world didn't treat people like her kindly. She had been told countless times that she wasn't good enough, that her dreams were too big, that she should know her place and not try to climb too high. But Zara had never been one to back down from a challenge. She fought for every opportunity, each inch of success she gained, carving her path in a world that often tried to push her back. The boutique, now a symbol of her success, hadn't come easily. Zara had faced countless hurdles to get to where she was today. There had been moments when she didn't know how she would make it through, when she had been told by so many that her dreams were out of reach. But every setback had fueled her determination to rise higher, to prove that she belonged. Every insult, every obstacle had only made her stronger, more resilient. And that was what made this moment so difficult to swallow. To be belittled, so casually, by someone who had no idea what it had taken for Zara to get here, it cut deep. Zara forced herself to push the thoughts aside, knowing she couldn't afford to let her emotions get the better of her. She had a reputation to maintain, a business to run, and people depending on her. It wasn't the first time someone had assumed she was just an employee in her own store. But today it felt different. Today, the humiliation hit harder. As the door chimes signaled Claire's exit, Zara turned her attention back to the store. The other staff members, who had witnessed the entire exchange, were avoiding her gaze. Zara could feel their unease, but she couldn't blame them. They were all just as stunned as she was by Claire's rudeness, but Zara didn't want them to see her as a victim. She didn't want them to pity her. She didn't want anyone to think for a second that she couldn't handle a little snub from someone like Claire. But deep down, it stung more than she was willing to admit. The moment passed, and soon enough, Zara found herself back at the counter, reviewing some paperwork. The store was quiet again, but her mind raced with the thoughts of the exchange that had just unfolded. She had been humiliated, but that wasn't the end of the story. No, Zara was not the kind of woman to let someone walk all over her. She was stronger than that. She had worked too hard to let a random customer's words define her. She had been underestimated her whole life, but each time someone had done that, she had only proven them wrong. And today would be no different. But as much as Zara tried to shake off the sting, A voice in her head kept asking why people like Claire acted the way they did. Why did they assume their money and status gave them the right to treat others as if they were less than human? Why did they look at someone like Zara, who had built an empire from the ground up, and reduce her to nothing more than a shop girl? It wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the underlying assumption that Zara wasn't worthy of being where she was. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening again. Zara looked up, expecting to see another customer. But this time it was Claire returning. She walked into the store with the same air of superiority she had worn before. But this time, there was something different in her demeanor. Her usual confidence had faltered, and she seemed unsure, almost sheepish. She paused for a moment, glancing around the store as if trying to find the right words. Zara raised an eyebrow, unsure of what was happening. She couldn't help but wonder if the confrontation earlier had made Claire realize something. Perhaps that she had crossed a line. Claire hesitated, then walked up to the counter, her steps slower this time. Zara stood still, not giving any indication of how she felt. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the most powerful response. I just wanted to say," Claire started, her voice softer than before, "that I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. I didn't mean it." Zara looked at her, surprised by the sudden change in tone. Claire's usual arrogance had been replaced by a hint of guilt, something Zara hadn't expected. It wasn't often that people like Claire admitted they were wrong, especially after they had been so condescending. But Zara wasn't interested in receiving an apology just for the sake of it. She wasn't about to let this moment define how she was going to be treated in her own store. "I appreciate your apology," Zara replied evenly. "But words are easy. It's the actions that matter." Claire seemed to think about this for a moment, nodding slowly. "You're right," she said quietly. "I can't even imagine how hard you must work to run a place like this. I was wrong to treat you like that." Zara studied her for a moment, weighing her words carefully. There was something in Claire's eyes that seemed sincere, something Zara wasn't used to seeing from people like her. Maybe Claire had learned something from the encounter, or maybe she hadn't. Zara wasn't about to assume the best, but at least there was a flicker of self-awareness, something Claire hadn't had earlier. "I'm glad you see that," Zara said, her voice still calm but firm. "It's easy to forget that everyone's story is different, but we all have something to offer, no matter where we come from." Claire nodded, her gaze dropping for a moment before meeting Zara's eyes once again. "I'll try to do better." I swear, Zara didn't need to hear any more. She wasn't interested in sympathy, nor did she want Claire to feel like she was entitled to forgiveness. Zara had earned her place in this world, and if Claire was truly sorry, then she would understand that Zara didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She had already done that. The encounter was over, and Claire left the store without another word. But for Zara, the lesson wasn't about Claire, it was about herself. She had faced the humiliation, the disrespect, and the prejudice head-on. She had stood tall, even when the world tried to knock her down, and in the end, Zara knew that it was not what others thought of her that mattered. What mattered was what she thought of herself. The days after Claire's return were quiet, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. There was an odd sense of unease, as though the universe was playing a trick on her. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay composed, to rise above any negative situation. But Claire's apology had done something Zara hadn't expected. It had made her think, not just about Claire, but about herself, about her place in the world, and about the assumptions people often made about her. Zara had worked so hard to carve out a space in an industry that wasn't always welcoming to people like her. She had faced so many obstacles, people who doubted her, who didn't believe she could make it on her own. But somehow, through all of that, she had built an empire. The boutique was thriving, its reputation for luxury and exclusivity spreading far and wide. Still, despite her success, Zara never let herself forget the lessons of her past, the struggles, the sacrifices, the moments when she had been told she didn't belong. And then came Claire. Zara couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if the roles were reversed. If Claire had known the truth from the beginning, that Zara was the owner of the boutique, the visionary behind its success, would she have treated her differently? Would she have still looked at Zara as if she didn't belong in this space? Or would her respect have been immediate, merely because of Zara's status? It was a thought that lingered in Zara's mind, uncomfortable and unsettling. People like Claire had the luxury of assuming that power, status, and wealth were what defined someone's worth. But for Zara, her worth had always been about more than what she owned or how much money she made. It was about what she had achieved against all odds, and the journey that had brought her here. For a moment, Zara allowed herself to imagine a different scenario, one in which Claire walked into the store and recognized her for who she truly was. What if Claire had known that the woman behind the counter was the one who had built the brand, who had designed the exclusive collections, who had made the boutique what it was? Would she have treated Zara with more respect, or would she have still made her feel small, despite the fact that Zara was the one who owned the luxury bags and jewelry Claire coveted? The thought was both empowering and painful. It reminded Zara that no matter how far she had come, people like Claire would always see her through the lens of race and class, assuming that someone like Zara had no place in the world of high fashion and luxury. But then, something unexpected happened. The next afternoon, Zara was sitting in her office reviewing some new designs. When she heard the chime of the store door, she looked up, half expecting to see another high-end customer entering, ready to purchase something expensive without so much as a glance at the staff. But to her surprise, it was Claire again, standing at the door looking hesitant. This time, Claire wasn't wearing her usual air of superiority. There were no sharp sunglasses hiding her eyes, no dismissive tone in her voice. She simply stood there for a moment as if unsure of how to proceed. Zara raised an eyebrow. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon," Zara said, trying to keep her tone neutral despite the surprise. She wasn't sure what to make of this sudden reappearance. After all, Claire had apologized the last time they spoke. What could she possibly want now? Claire hesitated before stepping inside. I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," she began, her voice uncertain. Zara didn't interrupt, allowing her to find the right words. "And I realized something." She paused for a long moment, glancing at the floor before looking back up at Zara. "I didn't just insult you that day. I insulted your entire journey. Your entire life. The things that made you who you are. And that's not okay." Zara felt a flicker of surprise. This was not the Claire she had encountered before. The woman who had been so quick to judge, to assume she knew everything about Zara based on her appearance and status. No, this was different. There was sincerity in Claire's eyes, something Zara hadn't seen in her before. "I never stopped to think about where you came from, what it took for you to get here," Claire continued, her voice quieter now. "I saw you standing behind the counter and I assumed you were just another employee. But that wasn't just wrong, it was cruel." She swallowed as if the words were hard for her to say. "I've been spoiled, I know that. I've always been able to get whatever I want, and I've never had to fight for anything. And because of that, I never understood what it means to struggle, to build something from nothing. But you did that, and I've come to realize that it's something I should respect, not tear down." Zara was silent for a long moment, letting Claire's words sink in. There was no arrogance in her tone now, no superiority, just an honest admission of ignorance and an apology. It wasn't often that people like Claire admitted their faults, especially after a moment of public humiliation. But here was Claire, vulnerable in a way Zara hadn't expected. It was both surprising and, oddly enough, refreshing. For a moment, Zara didn't know how to respond. She had been so caught up in her own feelings of humiliation and anger after their previous encounter that she hadn't fully processed how much this situation had affected Claire. It wasn't just about the insult. It was about what Claire's apology meant, a genuine realization of her own privilege and a willingness to change. Zara knew it wasn't going to erase the past, but it was a start, and sometimes that was all it took. "I appreciate your honesty," Zara said finally, her voice calm but firm. "But words are only the beginning. It's what you do next that really matters. It's about changing your actions, your perspective, and that's something you'll have to prove over time." Claire nodded, understanding the weight of Zara's words. "I know, I will. I want to be better. I want to learn." For the first time, Zara felt a glimmer of hope, not just for Claire, but for herself. Perhaps this was more than a simple apology. Perhaps it was a sign that things were changing, that people like her, people who had been overlooked and dismissed for far too long, were beginning to be seen and respected for the hard work they had put into their own success. And maybe, just maybe, It was time for Zara to stop hiding in the shadows, to stop letting people like Claire assume they knew her story without ever taking the time to understand it. After all, Zara wasn't just a store owner, she was a force to be reckoned with, and she wasn't about to let anyone forget that. The following weeks passed in a blur for Zara. The boutique continued to operate smoothly, the steady rhythm of business grounding her in the midst of everything that had transpired. But behind her calm demeanor, her mind was still reeling from the encounter with Claire. The apology had felt genuine, yes, but Zara couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered. She couldn't help but wonder if this moment, this rare admission of ignorance and growth, was something she could hold on to, or if it would just fade like all the others. People like Claire, with their wealth and power, had a way of moving through the world as if everything was disposable. Friendships, apologies, even emotions. They used what they needed and discarded it once they had what they wanted. Zara didn't want to believe that Claire's apology was just another fleeting gesture. She wanted to believe it was more than that. She had to. Yet as much as she wanted to believe in the sincerity of Claire's words, Zara couldn't forget the way she had been treated in the past, the way people like Claire had looked at her, not as a person but as a tool for their own convenience. It was a thought that haunted her, a reminder that despite all the progress she had made in life, there would always be people who saw her for what she wasn't, rather than for what she had become. They saw her skin, her background, and assumed that was all there was to know. They didn't see the sacrifices, the long nights spent working to build something that mattered. They didn't see the hours of planning, the countless setbacks, the loneliness that came with chasing a dream no one else could see. Zara leaned against the counter of her office, staring out the window. The city outside was bustling, alive with energy, and for a brief moment Zara felt as though she were on the outside looking in. She had spent so many years building her dream, fighting for her place in a world that often felt like it wasn't designed for someone like her. But now, as the sunlight filtered through the window, she realized something. She wasn't on the outside anymore. She had created a space for herself. She had fought through every obstacle and she had won. But that victory didn't come without its scars. Zara had paid the price for her success, both emotionally and physically. She had sacrificed relationships, time with family, and her own mental well-being to get to where she was. She had faced rejection after rejection, failure after failure, but each time she rose stronger, more determined. Still, there were days when she couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. The years spent proving herself. The years spent wondering if she was good enough. As much as Zara wanted to push those feelings aside, she knew they were a part of who she was. They were a part of her journey, and while they didn't define her, they shaped her into the woman she had become. It was in moments like these, quiet moments when she allowed herself to reflect, that Zara understood just how far she had come. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first opened the doors to the boutique. Back then she was filled with doubt, with fear, with uncertainty. She didn't know if she would make it. She didn't know if anyone would believe in her. But she had kept going, kept pushing, kept fighting. And eventually she had found her place. She had built this empire with her own hands, and now it was a testament to her resilience, to her vision, and to her strength. The boutique was a reflection of everything she had worked for, and in a strange way it was her legacy. It was proof that despite everything the world had thrown at her, Zara had risen above it. She had found her voice and she was no longer afraid to speak up for herself. But as Zara continued to reflect on her journey, she realized that there was something even more important than success, something that went beyond wealth, beyond status, beyond the things she had built. It was the people she had helped along the way. The employees she had mentored, the customers she had inspired, and the community she had cultivated. Zara had always believed that success wasn't just about what you achieved. It was about how you made others feel. And in the end, it was the people who had crossed her path, who had believed in her, that mattered most. Her thoughts drifted back to Claire. The apology had been a turning point, not just for Claire, but for Zara as well. It had forced her to confront her own beliefs, to ask herself if she was truly ready to let go of the past and embrace the future. Zara had always prided herself on her ability to stand tall in the face of adversity. But she had also learned that it was okay to let people in. It was okay to let go of the anger, the hurt, the resentment. It was okay to believe that people could change. that they could learn from their mistakes, and that forgiveness wasn't a sign of weakness, but of strength. Zara's gaze shifted back to the boutique floor below. She watched as her employees interacted with customers, offering their expertise, answering questions, and making people feel welcome. It was a beautiful sight, one that filled Zara with a sense of pride. These were the moments that made all the hard work worth it, the moments when she could see the impact she had on others, the ripple effect of her journey. But there was still work to be done. There were still battles to fight, obstacles to overcome. Zara knew that her journey was far from over. She had reached one milestone, but there would be others ahead. The world wasn't always kind to people like her, and she couldn't afford to let her guard down completely. But she also knew that she had something that no one could take away from her: her passion, her vision, and her unwavering belief in herself. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the city, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't a peace that came from external success or validation. It was a peace that came from within, a peace that came from knowing she had fought for everything she had, and that no one could take that away. She had built this life, this business, and this identity on her own terms, and in doing so, she had created a future where anything was possible. Zara took a deep breath, standing tall as she gazed out the window. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. She had built something from nothing, and now she was ready to embrace the future with open arms. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, knowing that she was more than capable of handling whatever the world threw her way. The past was behind her. The future was hers for the taking, and for the first time in a long time, Zara felt truly free. The days after Zara's quiet moment of reflection passed slowly, but in the most unexpected way. Each morning, the boutique seemed to buzz with an energy she had longed for, but at the same time, there was something deeper, a current beneath the surface that Zara couldn't quite ignore. She had come a long way, no doubt about it. Yet the echoes of her previous encounter with Claire, the wealthy woman who had humiliated her only to return and offer a heartfelt apology, were still lingering. It wasn't just the words that had struck Zara, it was the rawness behind them, the vulnerability Claire had displayed. Zara hadn't expected that. In fact, she had never expected anything from Claire. It wasn't that she didn't believe in second chances, but she had learned over the years that people often apologized because it was the right thing to do, not necessarily because they meant it, but this was different. Zara couldn't get the image of Claire's eyes out of her head. Those eyes, once filled with arrogance and entitlement, now held a hint of regret, a glimpse of understanding that had never been there before. Zara had been unsure at first whether she could trust Claire's words, but the sincerity in her apology had made Zara pause and think. Was it possible? Could someone like Claire truly change, or was it just an act? A temporary feeling brought on by guilt? Zara wasn't sure. She had been burned too many times by people who had offered empty apologies only to turn around and repeat the same mistakes. But there was something about Claire's willingness to come back, to admit her wrongs in a world where pride often prevented such humility, that made Zara reconsider. Maybe Claire wasn't like everyone else. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to learn, and if that were true, if she genuinely wanted to make amends, Zara knew that she had to give her a chance. Not for Claire, but for herself. The next time Claire walked into the boutique, Zara was ready. It wasn't just the usual day-to-day grind. No, this time Zara had been preparing herself mentally. She had been reflecting on everything that had happened, not just with Claire, but with everyone who had ever underestimated her. It wasn't just about this boutique, about the high-end items she sold, or the people who came in with their designer bags and expensive shoes. It was about the message she carried, the spirit she had fought so hard to build, and it was about showing the world that there was more to her than they could ever see. Claire entered the store with a different energy this time, softened, almost tentative. She wasn't the same woman who had walked through those doors weeks ago with her head held high, ready to belittle anyone she saw beneath her. This time there was a humility about her that Zara couldn't ignore. She approached the counter slowly, almost as if she were testing the waters, unsure of what kind of reception she would receive. But Zara didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. Instead, she stood tall, her gaze steady, waiting for Claire to speak. "I've been thinking a lot," Claire began, her voice low and sincere, her eyes avoiding direct contact at first. "And I've come to realize that I owe you more than just an apology." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. What I said that day, it wasn't just rude. It was cruel. And I want you to know that I understand that now. I never should have treated you like that. I should have respected you, but I didn't. And I'm sorry for that. Truly. Zara listened in silence, her gaze never wavering. Claire's words were soft, but there was a sincerity to them that Zara hadn't expected. She could tell Claire wasn't just saying the words out of obligation. There was real growth there, a shift in perspective that Zara had to acknowledge. Still, Zara remained cautious. Apologies were easy to make, but actions spoke louder than words. And Zara wasn't ready to let her guard down just yet. I appreciate your apology, Zara finally said, her voice calm, but firm. But words are just words. It's your actions that will show me if you truly mean what you're saying. Her tone was measured, not harsh, but with an underlying strength. She wasn't about to let Claire's apology be a get-out-of-jail-free card. People like Claire had the privilege of walking through life with little consequence. But Zara had worked too hard, had been put through too much to simply forgive without seeing proof of change. Claire nodded, her face reddening slightly. But she didn't shy away from the truth. I understand, and I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm serious. I was blind, Zara. I didn't see you for who you really were. I just saw someone who was in my way, someone to serve me. But that wasn't right. I can't take back the things I said, but I can learn. And I want to learn. Zara could see the conflict in Claire's eyes. She wasn't just apologizing to make herself feel better. She was acknowledging her own flaws, admitting that she had been wrong. It was a rarity, a moment of genuine self-reflection that wasn't common in the circles Claire traveled in. But Zara couldn't let herself get swept up in the moment. This wasn't just about Claire learning to be better. It was about Zara proving to herself that she wasn't the victim of anyone's whims. You have to understand, Zara said slowly, that this isn't just about me. It's about how the world sees people like me. People who come from nothing. People who are judged by the color of their skin, or the way they speak, or the way they look. We don't get second chances in this world. We have to fight for every inch. And when someone like you, someone with power, someone with privilege comes in and assumes they know our place in the world, it hurts. It hurts because we've worked twice as hard, and yet we're still not seen as equals. Claire's eyes softened, and for the first time she truly looked at Zara. Not the boutique owner, not the worker behind the counter, but Zara as a person, as someone who had a story, a life, a journey. I didn't know, she whispered. I had no idea. Zara didn't respond immediately. She was letting the weight of the moment sink in. This was more than just an apology. This was a turning point. For Claire, yes, but more importantly for Zara. She wasn't just going to let her pain define her. She was going to rise above it. And if that meant giving Claire a second chance, then she would. But it would be on her terms, not Claire's. Show me, Zara said simply, her voice steady. Show me that you're willing to be part of the change you want to see. And maybe, just maybe, I'll believe in you. Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. I will, she promised, her voice thick with sincerity. You have my word. Zara stood there for a moment longer, staring into Claire's eyes. She didn't see the wealthy woman who had once looked down on her. Instead, she saw someone who was learning, someone who was trying to become better. And that, Zara realized, was something worth believing in. As Claire turned to leave, Zara watched her go, a feeling of resolve settling over her. This wasn't just about the boutique, about success, or even about Claire. This was about Zara's journey, her own growth, and the choices she had made to get where she was. She wasn't going to let anyone make her feel small again. The apology wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The boutique had always been a place where luxury met vision, but Zara had never expected it to become more than just a business. It wasn't just about the products she sold or the customers who walked through the door. It was about something deeper, something far more personal. Zara had built this empire not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever doubted her, for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And it wasn't until recently that she realized her true purpose was far beyond that of a business owner. As the days passed after Claire's apology, Zara found herself reflecting on something bigger. She had spent so many years focused on proving herself, fighting to be seen in a world that often ignored or dismissed her. But now, as she looked out over her boutique, she saw a different possibility, one where her success wasn't just about her. It was about the people who would come after her. the ones who needed someone to show them that they too could rise above the expectations set by society. Zara wasn't just going to build a brand. She was going to build a legacy of empowerment, of breaking barriers, and of challenging the status quo. But it wouldn't just be her story to tell. It would be a story shared by everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough, or that they didn't belong. It would be the story of anyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel small. And Zara knew that the time had come to take action. It was time to give others the platform they deserved. The idea took root one afternoon as Zara sat in her office, reviewing the latest sales figures. Her mind drifted, as it often did, to the faces of the people who worked in the store, the staff who helped run the boutique, the ones who made it all happen. They were just as much a part of the success as she was, yet their stories went largely untold. They were the backbone of the business, the ones who made sure everything ran smoothly, the ones who interacted with customers every day. But how many of them had been given the chance to truly shine? How many of them had ever been given the space to show their true potential? Zara knew the answer: not enough. And so she made a decision. It wasn't going to be enough for her to sit back and enjoy the success she had worked so hard to build. She wanted to change the narrative, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been in her shoes. It wasn't just about creating a space for luxury. It was about creating a space for people to feel empowered, to find their own strength, and to break free of the limitations that society tried to place on them. The next day, Zara called a meeting with her staff. She sat at the head of the table, looking around at the faces of the people who had been with her from the beginning. They were her family, her support system. They had helped her build this dream, and now it was time to give them the opportunity to dream as well. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Zara began, her voice steady but filled with purpose, "about where we've been and where we're going. This boutique isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us, and I think it's time we take things to the next level, not just in terms of business, but in terms of impact. I want us to be more than just a luxury brand. I want us to be a place where people feel empowered, where they feel seen, where they feel like they can achieve anything. And that starts with us. It starts with the people who work here." The room was quiet for a moment as Zara's words settled in. The employees looked at each other, unsure of what Zara was getting at. But Zara didn't pause. She continued, her eyes sweeping over the room. "I want to create an internship program here, a program that focuses on giving people from underrepresented backgrounds the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to succeed in an industry that often overlooks them. I want to open doors for people who might not have had the chance otherwise. It's time we start giving people the chance to prove what they're capable of." There was a shift in the room. Zara could see it in their faces, the surprise, the curiosity, the excitement. They hadn't expected this. It wasn't just about the boutique anymore. It was about something far bigger. It was about giving others the tools to succeed, to rise, and to break down the barriers that had been placed in their way. "This isn't just about giving back," Zara continued. "It's about creating a community where everyone has the chance to succeed, regardless of their background. We're going to give people the chance to prove themselves, and we're going to do it in a way that changes the industry. We're going to change the narrative, and we're going to show the world that people like us, people who've been underestimated, people who've been told they're not good enough, have something powerful to offer." Zara's words filled the room with energy, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Her staff began nodding, their eyes lighting up with understanding. They saw what Zara was building, not just a business, but a movement that would change lives. In the weeks that followed, Zara worked tirelessly to put the internship program into place. She reached out to local community centers, schools, and organizations to find candidates who would benefit from the opportunity. She wanted to make sure that the program wasn't just about filling seats. It was about giving real opportunities to real people. Zara wasn't interested in token gestures. She wanted to make a lasting impact. The first intern came through the door a few weeks later. A young woman named Layla, who had always dreamed of working in fashion but had never had the resources to pursue it. She had spent years working in retail, saving every penny she could, hoping to one day break into the industry. But no one had ever given her a chance. Not until Zara. Layla's eyes were wide with excitement as Zara gave her a tour of the boutique, explaining the ins and outs of the business. She was eager to learn, to absorb everything Zara had to offer. But what struck Zara the most wasn't Layla's enthusiasm. It was the potential she saw in her. Layla wasn't just an intern. She was a symbol of everything Zara had worked for. Reminder of the power of giving someone the chance to prove their worth. And as the weeks went by, Zara watched Layla grow. She took on more responsibility, worked alongside the team, and even contributed ideas that helped improve the store's operations. Layla wasn't just learning, she was thriving. But Layla's success was just the beginning. As the internship program grew, more and more young people came through the door, people with dreams, with talent, with determination. And each one of them, in their own way, began to make their mark on the boutique. Zara's vision was coming to life, not just in the form of the boutique's success, but in the form of the lives that were being changed. It wasn't long before Zara realized that the true measure of her success wasn't the number of customers that walked through the door, or the amount of money the boutique made. It was the impact she had on the people around her, the people she had empowered to chase their dreams, to break down the walls that had been built around them. Zara had always known that success wasn't just about what you built for yourself. It was about what you built for others. And in that moment, as she looked around at the people who had walked through her doors and seen their own potential, she knew she had accomplished something far greater than she had ever imagined. Zara wasn't just creating a business, she was creating a legacy that would inspire generations to come, a legacy built on empowerment, on giving others the chance to rise. And that, Zara realized, was worth more than all the luxury items in the world. As the months passed, Zara found herself deeply immersed in the journey she had started, not just for herself, but for the people who were beginning to feel the ripple effects of her actions. The internship program was growing beyond what she had initially expected, and what started as a single effort to empower one person, Layla, had blossomed into a transformative opportunity for many others. It wasn't just about the interns anymore. It was about the community Zara had begun to cultivate, one built on trust, growth, and shared success. For Zara, it was a revelation. She had never imagined that this boutique, her dream, her pride, would become the birthplace of so much more than just luxury goods. It had become a hub of transformation, where young people could come not only to work and learn, but to truly find themselves. The boutique was no longer a place of silent transactions. It was a place of stories, of empowerment, of human connection. One afternoon, as Zara was organizing a new collection that was to be unveiled in the coming weeks, she received an email that caught her attention. It was from Claire, the woman who had once walked into the store and belittled Zara, not knowing the truth about who she was. The email subject simply read, "I want to make things right." Zara sat back in her chair, staring at the screen for a long moment. After everything that had happened, Claire's humiliating words, her apology, and their tentative truce, Zara hadn't expected Claire to reach out again. The wounds were still fresh, though they had healed over time. Zara had forgiven Claire, but in a way that didn't erase the past. It simply allowed her to move forward. But now, seeing this email, something in Zara stirred. Perhaps this was an opportunity to bridge another gap, not just between herself and Claire, but between Claire and everything she had once been blind to. Zara opened the email and read through it carefully. Claire explained that after their last meeting, she had been doing a lot of soul-searching. She admitted that her previous behavior wasn't just a reflection of her own ignorance, but also a symptom of a system that rewarded privilege while marginalizing others. Claire was acknowledging the deep-rooted issues of inequality that had influenced her actions without her even realizing it. She wanted to do more than apologize. She wanted to make a lasting impact, to use her position to help support causes and people who had been historically overlooked. And she wanted Zara to be a part of it. "Zara," the email continued, "I've realized that true change starts from within, but it also requires action. I'm asking you to partner with me. Let's work together to create a platform where Young people from marginalized communities can access not just internships but mentorships, educational opportunities, and financial support to pursue their dreams in the fashion industry. I want to use the privilege I have to create real change, and I want to start with you. I believe in what you're doing, and I believe we can do even more together. Zara stared at the screen, her mind racing. The idea was bold, ambitious, and, perhaps, exactly what the world needed. For a moment she was hesitant. She had learned to trust few people, especially those who had once treated her as if she were invisible. Claire's past actions had left a mark on Zara, and though the apology had been sincere, trusting her again was another matter entirely. But then Zara thought about everything she had already done, the way she had fought for her own place in this world, the way she had fought for the people who worked with her, the way she had built a space that was about more than just making money. Zara knew that if she truly believed in the power of change, she couldn't limit it to just her store. She couldn't keep the doors to opportunity closed just because she had been hurt in the past. Perhaps this was the moment to push past the discomfort, to use Claire's resources, her influence, and their shared vision to make a real, lasting difference. Perhaps this was the legacy Zara had been building all along, and now she had the chance to share it with the world. After a few moments of deep thought, Zara responded to Claire's email. She didn't commit immediately but agreed to meet. They needed to talk face to face, to truly understand one another and decide if this partnership was something both could stand behind. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Zara spent those days preparing, not just for the conversation with Claire, but for what it meant to take the next step. She reflected on her own journey, how far she had come, how many people had doubted her, and how she had fought to build something real, something meaningful. Now, she was being asked to build something even bigger. The day of the meeting, Zara arrived at a sleek upscale cafe downtown, one of the few places in the city where people like Claire felt comfortable and at home. Zara walked in, dressed in her usual no-nonsense style, feeling confident but cautious. She wasn't going to let herself be swept away by the promises of someone who had once treated her so poorly. But she wasn't going to close herself off either. She had learned too much to let fear guide her decisions. Claire was already seated when Zara arrived. She stood up as Zara approached, her demeanor far different from their first meeting. She was no longer wearing the polished mask of superiority, but something more raw, more vulnerable. She smiled, genuinely this time, and Zara could see that she had changed. "Zara," Claire said as they shook hands, "thank you for agreeing to meet. I know I have a lot to prove, and I don't expect you to just take my word for it. But I want to show you that I'm serious about this, that I'm committed to making things right." Zara nodded, sitting down across from her. "I'm listening," she said, her voice steady. "But words are easy. Show me how serious you really are."